Quite often when I'm reporting on a crime, you are trying to, well, essentially you're trying to find out what happened. That's the first thing you're always thinking of, what happened. And whether that is trying to figure out who a victim was, trying to figure out what weapon was used, trying to figure out who saw what, you're always trying to figure out what happened. And quite often that is a very slow process. So for example, it's always a huge challenge trying to find out the identity of a victim in a crime. So when I say that it starts with, it can start with tiny bits of information that build up. It might be that a neighbour has told you what colour hair she had, and a witness has told you what they think she might have done for a living, and on Facebook you've seen a tribute to someone who also did that for a living, and then you see a photo of someone who has red hair, and then you're just sort of finding out all these tiny bits that eventually start to build up into something bigger. And then obviously, like, it's very important to confirm everything and not just go off these little bits that you're finding, but you just start to notice that one tiny thing that someone told you that you thought was really insignificant all forms part of a bigger picture that helps you in the end to get there.
If I'm away for a week, I'm constantly writing headlines and leads to my feature in my head and constantly changing them as the week goes on. As new things crop up and new experiences happen, and suddenly it becomes, okay, no, this is what I've just seen here is a better way to start this story than what I saw yesterday. And when I get back, my notes tend to be a series of headlines and leads that I've written out and rejected. But that's a key skill, is sort of being able to spot, when you're actually travelling, what is the key angle to this, and that's the real challenge. What is the aspect to this? Because you may be doing something that millions of people have done before, a destination that's been well trodden and been written about 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times. The key is to find it's not necessarily the new experience or something that hasn't been written about before, because your experience is a unique experience. The key is to find the way to present that and make people want to experience that with you by reading the story.
Courts was a different challenge, and it was very interesting. It was great sort of work, but there were ways that I felt that it could have been done better. Now, partly this was because of my own laziness. I found it very tiring to be scribbling for 8 hours a day in shorthand, and then having to transcribe my shorthand back in. And there were so many days where you're like, what did I just write? And of course, you have to be absolutely accurate when it comes to court reporting, because you are effectively on record there. So I found that it was permitted to take my iPad in and to take notes on the iPad, and so I started doing that, and I found that it was a lot easier on my fingers and easier to write quickly. And I realized that there were actually ways of, because I had the iPad, I had apps, I had a library, I had all these other things available to me at the touch of my fingers, which was so much more than just your pad and your pen. So why write? Why type out everything that's going on in court when you can also use shortcuts to make sure that you don't need to write a whole sentence or a whole phrase. A couple of letters on your keyboard, and suddenly the shortcuts get expanded to a full phrase, to a full, to someone's whole name, to someone's whole title, so that you could take notes and capture information much faster, and it made me much more accurate. Then while I was writing everything down, why just write one note after note after note? Why not make sure I had all my notes sorted in different categories according to, say, the judge, or according to which defendant, which trial? So then I got a database app to help me file my notes. And then why stop there? Why not, when I got access to court documents, why not scan those and store them in my database, along, so that all the documents from a particular trial and all my notes from a particular trial could be in the same place all at once. And then why not keep track, while I was keeping track of all the lawyers, why not make sure I have all their contacts in the same place? And then again, that gets added to a database. And why not send emails that had, for instance, particular snippets of trials and things. So it kind of built on from there, so that by the time I was, I guess, finished at court, I had a very comprehensive database of pretty much every person that I had, every case that I had covered, and along with supporting documents, quotes from lawyers, additional information which was off the record but which was useful for me to know and useful for me to pass on to other reporters, and also emails, say, from judges and their associates, so that we would know what restrictions there were on the trial.
So I started off as a reporter for the Sun Herald newspaper. Because I was young and enjoyed music, I eventually got moved on to the music column. So I'd write a column every week interviewing a whole range of bands, from classical music musicians to bigger bands like Michael Bolton and Alice Cooper, the big kind of stars. It was really fun. It was something that I knew I'd have something in the paper every week, and I do a lot of videos. I'm actually a flute player, so I flew up to David Helfcott's house, who's the pianist, and took my flute and got it videoed, so we played a duet together, and then I could write about my experience playing flute with him.
Newsgathering, the process of newsgathering has changed exponentially in the past 20 years, let's face it. You know, as a hardened old journalist, you know, I would say that journos have it a lot easier now. But, you know, we couldn't just Google something or go on Twitter and, like, you know, call out for sources and case studies and stuff like that. But, you know, it has changed a lot and it's really exciting, but I still like to think that the old methods of news gathering, you know, I'd hate to think that people are letting go of them, because, you know, how you get a great story is still the same. It's about contacts, it's about, you know, getting to know people, it's about face-to-face contact. I'd hate to think there were journalists out there who are thinking that they can sit at a computer or they can get on the phone and get as good a story, because that's just bullshit. Like, you always get the better story by going there, you know, and we've proven that countless times. If you think that you can call someone and get as good a story as going out and fronting up at their door, you know, you're just totally wrong.
I think politics is a conflict-driven business, and I think news generally thrives on conflict, on controversy, so there's a natural, they come together naturally. In terms of sexing it up, I don't know that I'd agree that it's being sexed up. What I would say is that there's probably more emphasis on conflict in reporting today than there was 5 or 10 years ago, and that's a factor of the faster news cycle. Essentially, it's hard to go through a 500-page Productivity Commission report and pull out the meaty sort of policy recommendations in there. It's easy to report, you know, such and such a minister said this was good and his opposite number said it was crap. That's often the way reporting will go in the first take of a story these days. What's important that we don't lose is, that doesn't get lost in the process of reporting, is some of the detail around what public policy could be and where it will take us as a nation.
Yeah, so immigration is very different to the music column. Obviously, you're not going to sit around drinking soy lattes with the minister, like I was doing with artists. So I try and pull out elements that I think people would be most interested in. And I often think of my family when I'm writing it. I've got 3 younger sisters and parents, and they're not at all involved in politics. So to explain to them what my story is about, I try and think of explaining it to them, because if you get too caught up in the jargon and use all these big words that to 10% of the population may understand. But I recently wrote a story and my sister rang, I just don't really understand what you wrote. So I thought that's a really good way to think about it, writing to someone who has no idea what you're talking about.